You know that feeling when you wake up on a random Tuesday morning somewhere in your 30s and for no particular reason you open your banking app. Not because something went wrong, not because a payment is due, just because. And you look at the number on the screen, and then you look at it again. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question surfaces that you have been successfully avoiding for longer than you would like to admit. Is this where I am supposed to be right now? Not is this where I want to be, not is this the life I imagined, but the more uncomfortable version of the question. Is this where someone my age, with my income, with my education, with the decade of working and earning and trying to be responsible that I have behind me, is supposed to be financially right now? And the honest answer for most people in their 30s is no. Not because they are irresponsible, not because they are lazy or undisciplined or bad with money in some fundamental way, but because they have been making a specific set of financial mistakes that are so common, so normalized, so woven into the fabric of what a normal 30-year-old life looks like in this country, that most people making them have no idea they are mistakes at all. They just think they are living their life. My name is Leo, and I've become slightly obsessed with one question: why do the people who seem to be doing everything right end up feeling the most stuck? And nowhere is that question more painfully relevant than in the financial lives of people in their 30s. Because your 30s are the decade where the financial decisions you made in your 20s start producing visible consequences, where the investments you did not make start showing up as gaps, where the debt you carried a little too casually starts feeling a little too heavy, where the lifestyle you built on the assumption that your income would keep growing starts feeling like a trap instead of a reward. Today, I want to talk about the specific money mistakes that are keeping the average 30-year-old from building the kind of financial foundation that their future self is going to desperately need. Not to make you feel bad, not to add to the financial anxiety that most people in their 30s are already carrying around, but because seeing the mistake clearly is the only thing that makes changing course possible. And at 30, changing course is not just possible, it is exactly the right time. Before we get into the specific mistakes, let me give you a picture of what average actually looks like at 30. Because I think most people dramatically underestimate how financially precarious the average 30-year-old actually is. The average American in their early 30s has less than $10,000 in savings. They carry an average of nearly $8,000 in credit card debt alone, not counting student loans, car payments, or any other obligations. They have started investing for retirement, but are saving at a rate that will leave them dramatically short of what they will need. And they are spending somewhere between 90 and 100% of their monthly income, leaving almost no margin for error and no fuel for the kind of wealth building that could actually change their trajectory. That is the average. And average at 30 is a setup for a very stressful 50 and a very uncertain 65. So let us talk about the specific mistakes driving those numbers. Mistake number 1. Treating your emergency fund as a suggestion rather than a requirement. Most 30-year-olds have heard about emergency funds. They know they are supposed to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in a liquid, accessible account. And most of them have something that they loosely refer to as an emergency fund that is actually a vague intention sitting in a checking account that also gets used for concert tickets and weekend trips and the occasional impulse purchase that felt justified at the time. A real emergency fund is a specific dollar amount sitting in a specific account that is separate from your checking account that you have a clear policy about not touching for anything that does not meet your own definition of a genuine emergency. Without that specificity, without that separation, without that policy, what you have is not an emergency fund. It is just money that has not been spent yet. And here is why this matters so much more in your 30s than it did in your 20s. In your 20s, a financial emergency was an inconvenience. Maybe you had to borrow a little money from your parents or put something on a credit card and deal with it next month. The stakes were relatively low because your financial life was relatively simple. But by 30, your financial life is almost certainly more complex. You might have a mortgage or a lease you cannot easily escape. You might have a partner whose financial life is intertwined with yours. You might have a child or aging parents or both. You have built a life that has real structural costs that do not pause when something unexpected happens. And when something unexpected happens without an emergency fund in place, the cascading consequences are significantly more damaging at 30 than they were at 22. Mistake number 2. Still carrying the debt you told yourself was temporary. Almost every 30-year-old I have ever spoken to about their finances has some version of the same story about their debt. They took it on for a reason that made sense at the time. Student loans for a degree that was going to open doors, a car loan for the vehicle they needed to get to work, a credit card balance that accumulated during a rough patch and then just sort of stayed. And in each case, when they took on the debt, they told themselves it was temporary. A bridge. Something they would deal with as soon as things settled down a little. Things never quite settled down, the debt never quite got dealt with, and now it is sitting there accruing interest every single month, quietly consuming a portion of every paycheck before they have had a chance to do anything intentional with it. Here is what makes the debt mistake so particularly damaging in your 30s compared to any other decade. It is not just the interest you are paying, it is the compound growth you are missing while you are paying it. Every dollar that goes toward a credit card balance charging 20% interest is not just a dollar you spent on debt, it is a dollar that is not compounding in your investment account. And the opportunity cost of that dollar, the wealth it would have built if it had been invested instead of used to service debt, is almost always significantly larger than the interest you saved by paying the debt off. Let me make this concrete. Say you are carrying $8,000 in credit card debt at 20% interest and you are making minimum payments of around $200 a month. At that rate, it will take you over 5 years to pay off that debt, and you will pay nearly $5,000 in interest alone. $5,000 to borrow $8,000 for 5 years. But here is the number that really matters. If instead of paying that interest you had invested that same $200 per month for 5 years at a 7% return, you would have accumulated nearly $14,000. The debt did not just cost you $5,000 in interest, it cost you the $14,000 that money could have been building in your investment account. This is the invisible tax of carrying debt into your 30s. It is not just what you owe, it is what you are not building because of what you owe. And once you see that calculation, once you understand that every month of carrying high interest debt is a month of compound growth you will never get back, the urgency of eliminating that debt becomes something very different from a vague financial responsibility. It becomes a genuine emergency. Mistake number 3. Letting lifestyle inflation consume every raise you have ever received. This one is the sneakiest mistake on this list because it does not feel like a mistake at all when it is happening. It feels like reward. It feels like your hard work finally paying off. It feels like you are simply living the life that your income now supports. Here is what actually happened. You got a raise. Your salary went up by $5,000 a year, and within 12 months, your monthly expenses had quietly increased by just enough to absorb that raise completely. Maybe you moved to a slightly nicer apartment, maybe you started eating out a little more often, maybe you upgraded your car or your wardrobe or your vacation budget in ways that each felt completely reasonable individually, but collectively consumed every dollar of additional income you earned. This pattern has repeated itself with every raise you have received since you started working. And the result is that despite earning meaningfully more than you did 5 years ago, your savings rate is almost identical to what it was when you were making significantly less. You have more lifestyle but not more wealth. And lifestyle, unlike wealth, does not compound. The math on this is brutal when you actually look at it honestly. If you had invested just half of every raise you have received over the last 5 years instead of absorbing it into lifestyle, your investment portfolio would be meaningfully larger right now. Not dramatically larger, not retirement changing larger after 5 years, but large enough to see the beginning of compound interest doing something real. Large enough to feel the psychological shift that comes from having money working for you instead of money just passing through you. Mistake number 4. Having a retirement account but not actually understanding what is in it. Most 30-year-olds have a 401k. Their employer offered it, HR explained it during onboarding, they picked a contribution percentage, they selected funds from a list they did not fully understand, and then they have not looked at it meaningfully since. They know it exists, they assume it is fine, they occasionally feel vaguely responsible about it when retirement comes up in conversation. This is not investing. This is sleepwalking through one of the most important financial decisions of your life. Because what is inside your retirement account matters enormously. The difference between a portfolio of high-fee, actively managed funds and a portfolio of low-cost index funds can easily amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 30-year period. Not because of returns, because of fees. A 1% annual fee sounds trivial. On a portfolio that grows to $500,000, that 1% fee costs you approximately $130,000 over 30 years, from a fee that sounded like nothing. Mistake number 5. Measuring your financial health by how your life looks rather than what your numbers say. This might be the most psychologically complex mistake on this list because it operates almost entirely below the level of conscious awareness. Most 30-year-olds assess their financial health by comparing their lifestyle to the lifestyles of the people around them. Do I have a nice apartment? Do I drive a decent car? Do I go on vacation once or twice a year? Do I eat at good restaurants and wear reasonable clothes and generally appear to be doing fine? If the answers are yes, they conclude that they are doing fine financially. And they may well be doing fine by the standards of their social circle, but their social circle, statistically speaking, is not doing particularly well financially. The average person in your peer group is carrying significant debt, saving inadequately for retirement, and living in a lifestyle that their income supports on the surface, but that their net worth does not actually support underneath. Net worth is the only number that actually tells you how you are doing financially, not your income, not your lifestyle, not the car in your driveway or the apartment you live in or the vacations you post about. Net worth. Assets minus liabilities. The number that remains when you subtract everything you owe from everything you own. And for most 30-year-olds, that number is significantly lower than their lifestyle would suggest. Some have a negative net worth, they own less than they owe, and they have no idea because they have never actually calculated it. Now we have covered the financial and behavioral mistakes that are keeping most 30-year-olds from building the foundation their future self is going to need. But I want to spend this final section on the mistakes that operate at the deepest level, the ones that are not about specific financial decisions, but about the underlying psychology and identity that drives every financial decision you make. Because you can fix your emergency fund and pay off your debt and stop inflating your lifestyle and still find yourself stuck if you do not address the psychological layer underneath all of those behaviors. Mistake number 6. Making financial decisions based on what your peers are doing rather than what your numbers require. Your 30s are the decade when social financial pressure reaches its peak intensity. Your friends are buying houses, your colleagues are driving nicer cars. Your social media feed is a carefully curated highlight reel of everyone you have ever met appearing to live their best and most expensive life simultaneously. And the pressure to keep pace with all of that, to not fall visibly behind, to maintain the appearance of doing as well as everyone around you seems to be doing, is genuinely enormous. What most people do not realize is that the people they are trying to keep up with are trying to keep up with someone else. The person driving the car you wish you had is probably stretching their budget to maintain it. The couple who just bought the house you envy is probably more stressed about money than they appear. The friend who always seems to be traveling is probably doing it on credit cards she will be paying off for the next 2 years. Everyone is performing a version of financial success that is at least partially constructed for an audience, and you are bankrupting your future to keep up with a performance. The antidote to this is almost embarrassingly simple. Stop measuring your financial progress against other people's visible lifestyle and start measuring it against your own goals and your own numbers. What does your net worth need to be at 40 for you to have the options you want? What does your investment portfolio need to look like at 50 for retirement to be a genuine possibility? What does your emergency fund need to contain for you to sleep without financial anxiety? These are the metrics that matter, not whether your car is as nice as your colleagues or your apartment is as impressive as your friends. Mistake number 7. Avoiding money conversations with your partner. If you are in a committed relationship, nothing on this list will matter as much as this one. Because your financial life and your partner's financial life are not two separate things that occasionally interact. They are one interconnected system. And a system where one person is building good financial habits while the other is undermining them, or where both people are avoiding the conversation entirely because money feels too uncomfortable to discuss, is a system that produces worse outcomes than either person would produce individually. The couples who build real wealth together are not the ones who never disagree about money. They are the ones who have developed the capacity to have honest, regular, non-defensive conversations about their financial situation, their individual money histories, their different relationships with spending and saving, and their shared goals for the future. These conversations are uncomfortable at first. They surface differences and fears and old patterns that both people would rather leave unexamined. But avoiding them does not make those differences disappear. It just lets them operate silently in the background, shaping financial decisions without ever being acknowledged or addressed. If you have been avoiding a money conversation with your partner because it always turns into an argument or because you are afraid of what you might find out, that avoidance is costing you, not just financially, relationally, because money stress is one of the most consistent predictors of relationship dissatisfaction. And money stress that is never talked about openly is significantly more corrosive than money stress that is named, understood, and addressed together. Mistake number 8. Waiting for a better time to start. This is the final mistake, and it is the most expensive one on this list. Not because it is the most dramatic or the most psychologically complex, but because of the mathematical reality of what waiting costs when compound interest is involved. Every year you wait to start investing seriously is not just a year of returns you miss, it is a year of compounding on those returns that you miss, and a year of compounding on the compounding. The cost of waiting is not linear, it is exponential, and it accelerates in the wrong direction the longer you wait. Here is the number that makes this concrete. An investor who starts at 30 and invests $500 a month until age 60 ends up with approximately $600,000 at a 7% return. An investor who waits until 35 to start the exact same $500 monthly contribution ends up with approximately $410,000. 5 years of waiting cost nearly $200,000. Not because they invested less money over their lifetime, but because compound interest had 5 fewer years to work. Now here's what I need you to hear clearly at the end of all of this. 30 is not too late. I want to be completely unambiguous about that because everything I have described in this video could easily be read as a verdict rather than a diagnosis. It is a diagnosis, and diagnoses exist to inform treatment, not to assign blame. If you recognized yourself in several of these mistakes, That recognition is not a reason to feel bad about the decade behind you. It is the exact information you need to make the decade ahead of you different. You have time. You have income. You have the one thing that the version of you at 50 will not have more of. Time for compound interest to work. The average 30-year-old who reads a description of their financial mistakes and then goes back to doing exactly what they were doing before will be the average 50-year-old wondering why things did not work out differently. The 30-year-old who takes one concrete action this week, opens an investment account, sets up an automatic contribution, calculates their net worth for the first time, calls their credit card company about their interest rate, any single concrete action starts a chain of decisions that compounds just as reliably as the money eventually will. Your future self is not asking you to fix everything at once. They are asking you to fix one thing today, and then one more thing next week, and to keep going long enough for the math to do what the math always does when you give it enough time and enough fuel. Start today. The best time was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now.